really excited today's guest. I've been a fan for years. I'm so excited about his new book. We're going to talk about that. Andrew McCarthy, he's a well-known director, well-known actor, author of 3 New York Times best-selling books, and his new book is Who Needs Friends? An Unscientific Examination of Male Friendship Across America. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks, man. Good to be with you.
Well, I got to, it's I was so excited to talk to you because it's such an interesting topic, male friendship. And your book got started when your 21-year-old son turned to you at the dinner or at the kitchen table and said, "Dad, where are your friends? Who are your friends?"
Yeah, well, he said, "You don't really have any friends, do you, Dad?" And because he was telling me some story about one of his friends. We were laughing, and he just kind of paused and looked up and said that, and it hit me sort of like a ton of bricks. And I said, "Yeah, Sammy, I have friends. I just don't see them, but I know they're there, and that's enough." And he kind of accepted that for whatever it was worth and left. And I sat with it for a while, and it wasn't enough. And so I thought I need to go see my friends, So because there were like these core group of guys that when I was a very young man coming of age, my early 20s, that were like my chosen family, I guess, or the guys who helped me become who I became as a man, So, and they'd all through the course of life and jobs and marriages and kids and whatever, they'd all sort of scattered around the country, and I hadn't seen any of them in years and years, and thought I need to go see them.
It was interesting. The book is divided basically into 5 chapters. You have 5 friends, and your kind of journey as you cross America, 10,000 miles, and all the other people you talk to. And what was interesting, what I found fascinating, was the common thread of so many guys saying, "Well, it's my wife's friends, and she makes the schedule," and that happens to a lot of guys.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, because as you said, I set out to see my friends, but along the way, I started talking to all sorts of men. I mean, blues musicians in Mississippi, cops in Ohio, Texas auto workers, cowboys in Wyoming. Tons of guys. I would just stop guys random on the street, in a bar, wherever. And I go, "Hey, man, will you talk to me about your friends?" And invariably, they kind of look at me like, "Huh?" And then, but not a single guy said no to me. They all kind of, and then invariably, when I was done, most guys said, "I've never talked about this before," because like you allude to, yeah, guys just sort of become, there's all sorts of statistics. Guys have become so isolated. And as we go our way, tend to have fewer and fewer active friendships. And so I became really interested in that as I was sort of rekindling mine and feeling this sort of emotional safety net start to spread under me as I was going across the country, as I was reconnecting with my friends. I was talking to these other men, and just there was a lot of common threads, like you say. The wives handle their social life, or they have friends but they don't see them, or there's a certain macho attitude of like, "I don't need that," because because with men, vulnerability can be equated to weakness, and the one thing a man can never show is weakness. So anyhow, yeah.
There's so much talk today. My friend Scott Galloway does so much on young men today and the disenfranchised young men. There's not a lot of men, and there's so much focus on young men, but not necessarily our contemporaries and men where they fit into the world right now. And I was very taken with it because I have my flaws, but one thing I've been very good at is friendships. I have my high school friends, my college friends, friends I met in the city, friends I met through business. And like anything else, it takes a lot of work. It takes energy. And a lot of guys they're putting their energy into supporting their family and, providing, and that's their main energy. And it's easy to get lost.
Absolutely. Good for you for maintaining those kind of things.
Yeah, I got a lot of faults, but one thing, I've been a really good friend, but I realized in thinking about it and reflecting and knowing I was talking to you, is I put a lot of energy into it, and they've always been very important to me.
Well, and it helps you probably be a better person too. At one point, I was in Kentucky seeing a friend, and my wife called me and she said, "How's Matthew? What are you guys doing?" And I said, "Just stupid stuff." And she said, "Oh, it's good you're doing stupid stuff. You don't do enough stupid stuff." And I said, "I think I do plenty of stupid stuff." She goes, "Yeah, but not the stupid stuff that prevents the real stupid stuff."
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so having those friendships helps you, I think, and it grounds us in a way that when we don't have it, because you start listening to those voices alone in your own head, and, you can convince yourself of anything and justify anything. Whereas a friend will kind of go, "Yo, Donny, what do you think, dude?" And you go, yeah, I guess you're right, and we need that, but it's a crazy thing, because the more I started, researching this as I was traveling around, and then thought I'd write a book about this, male friendship has changed so much. Like in the 100 years ago, 150 years ago. Say Abraham Lincoln had a best friend, Joshua Speed, and they were near intimate friends. And men back in the good old days would physically touch each other. They would write each other letters that would seem almost like love letters to us now. They were very effusive in the import of their friendships. And somewhere along the line, somewhere around World War II, and then the John Wayne of it all, masculinity and manhood became about carry your own water, just to be stoic, be silent,
rugged individualists. Yeah, right.
And it's just sort of wall ourselves in and shut ourselves off, and that's become what manhood is. And like it's still something that's the dominant conception of manhood, and anything other than that is weakness. And so I don't know how this happened to us, but it did, and we've all fallen for it. And I'm decidedly not this kind of macho dude, and yet I fall for it too. This idea that I'll do this alone. I'll do it alone.
The first friend you hooked up with, Steve, is that the pronunciation? Sebi.
Yeah.
Really tough story. Talk to me about connecting with him.
Well, Sebi's a guy I met when I was, 20 years old, I suppose, and we became good friends. And he's older than me, and and he moved away for jobs and whatever. And he ended up down in Baltimore. I live in New York, and so he's only 4 hours away. But it becomes a habit friendship. It's showing up. And so I went down to see him. He canceled on me a couple of times when I said, I'm going to come down and see you. And he canceled on me, and he sounded funny on the phone the last time he canceled on me. And I said, I'm just getting in the car and going. I'm just going to show up at this door, And so I did, and Sebi's had this terrible, terrible back trouble, and he needs an 8-hour operation. He can hardly walk now, and he's just sort of become a shut-in in certain ways, which is, and he was a wildly gregarious social guy, and sort of for that to happen, and then of course when things like that happen, shame kicks in, and we become ashamed, and so when we're ashamed, we just sort of withdraw and make our lives smaller and smaller. And for someone like my friend who is so expansive and extroverted, that's just like not having air to breathe. So I just knocked on his door, and he opened the door and said, "What the hell are you doing here?" With a mix of relief, I think, underneath the sense of shame and threat, but just the joy that And when I drove home that night after I left him, he called me 3 times while I was driving the 4 hours home, just say thanks for coming down. And he called me again now and just thank you for coming down. It takes so little, I think, but we don't do, because we're all so busy and doing all our stuff, I do really think that cliched line of 90% of life is showing up. I really think it's physically show up, and go to the wedding, go to the whatever, and just go there and be there. And there's no substitute for that. Yeah, we can text and we can do all that stuff, but there's no substitute for like little FaceTime, And so anyway, my friend, and as I drove across the country, I kept calling Sebi, and we'd talk while I was driving. He sort of rode shotgun with me across the country. And he'd say, "Okay, where are we now?" And I go, "Okay, we're at the Grand Canyon." He goes, "Oh, remember when we went to the Grand Canyon?"
Right.
Okay, And so he was sort of like my co-pilot along the way.
What were the threads, as you said, you talked to so many guys about friendship. What were some of the threads that you learned about what makes friendships and what keeps friendships from really blossoming, or not blossoming, but continuing over the years?
Well, I think it's a bit like a muscle and they atrophy. It's like going to the gym. It's like misery to go to the gym. If you didn't, once you're in shape, you want to stay in shape. And like you talk with your friends, right? But I do think this notion of opening our, particularly as we're older, to make a friend as an adult, it requires an active, conscious will to be vulnerable in a certain way. You know what I mean? And guys don't, like we were saying, naturally want to do that because vulnerability disappears to be weakness, and weakness is what we can't be. So it's sort of a weird trap we put ourselves in. And it was interesting. When I talk to young men, I would say, I asked everybody I met, I said, "You lonely? You get lonely?" And all the young guys would say, "Oh yeah, I get lonely a lot."
Yeah, because you know why? It's because of this fucking thing. I'm holding up my iPhone.
I'm not sure it is. But because older guys, no older guys would admit. Maybe it is the phones, but it was interesting that older
just
guys.
Technology in general that meant you can isolate yourself and still feel connected, but you're not getting that same human connection.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. But in some ways, of course. And it doesn't allow us to get bored in a certain way.
You started to say older. You started older guys.
Older guys would not admit to me that they were lonely.
Really?
No older guy. I'd say, "You get lonely?" And invariably they would go, "No."
No.
And I always know when I say no too fast, I'm either lying or it's something that frightens me. And so older guys, and if we don't admit we're lonely, I mean, there's a huge statistics of guys and loneliness, and any of just people and loneliness, Americans, and all over the planet, loneliness and isolation, and all these statistics about how you're mentioning Scott Galloway. He always talks about these statistics of like 50% increased risk of dementia for people that are socially isolated. Harvard did an 85-year study. 85 years, where they said the single most important ingredient for longer,
social
healthier,
interaction, social interaction,
right? And it's as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes and 6 alcohol drinks a day to be up lonely physically. So it's a crazy kind of thing. And the more lonely we get, the harder it is to reach out to people and stuff. And because again, we're ashamed of that. And and I think that's why I do think, like, when I was driving across the country to see these guys, it was sort of this accidental road trip. I didn't plan to go on this trip. I hate driving. And I drove on only back roads because I hate highways. So I didn't want to be on highways. I was afraid of trucks, So I ended up traveling these tiny little back roads and going into mom and pops all over the place. And it was sort of this rediscovery of an America I thought I knew too, which was absolutely sort of a revelation. Because once you get it, we see things on the news and on TV, we think we know what America is, and it's so polarized and all that stuff. And I made an active choice not to talk to anybody about
politics. Yeah.
I don't care about your politics. First of all, it's easy enough to tell most of the time.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have cared less about their politics, because once you start talking politics, people get angry. They shut off.
They shut down. They
become know-it-all. I just wanted to share your human interaction with me, and that's what I got. I was surprised how open everybody was. Sorry, go ahead.
Speaking of politics, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see a generation. We have a president who has a certain kind of view of masculinity and is the epitome of how do I want to say this? We're getting a very skewed view of what man is and what masculinity is, and in a very twisted way. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Well, of course. I mean, whenever I see that kind of aggressive bluster that's not supported by, I just see fear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just see fear. It's so thinly masked fear that it's like, I don't know how everyone can't see that. I don't know how anyone can go, that's a man.
Yeah.
I go, that's just a weak, scared guy. And, I don't care about, and, anyway, so that's what I see when I see behavior like that. And when I would meet guys, I'd ask guys too who were really presenting in that real strong, macho, hard ass way. But it's fine. But I'd say, you ever get afraid? And they would, no, what are you talking about? And I'm like, wow,
yeah,
I do a lot. And they go, well, I might sometime, and then they start to soften.
And they open up, yeah.
But initially you're met with that kind of wall, and there's not a lot of room or a lot of access in that. And that's, I think that's why we're all so separate and lonely, that in that damn phone you've got in your hand there. Yeah.
Are most men happy with their lives, or most men living with regrets? I know that's a very general question, but I'm so curious because you just spent all this time just talking to men. And I'm just curious, do you think most men are kind of happy with their lot in life?
No.
Why?
I think largely that sense of isolation. I'd say you're probably happier with, don't you? Like when you are surrounded by your friends and so. Like I'll speak for myself. When like I said earlier, I began to find this sort of safety net underneath me as I drove. Well, I asked everybody what one word would you associate with friendship, and most guys said trust. And to which I would say trust too, but for me it's a feeling of safety, and safety is more than trust. Safety is just a sense of protected in this way, and I'm safe with you, And I think when that happens, then I'm a lot I open out, and I'm a lot happier with my life. If I'm in protection mode, I can't afford to be happy and relaxed. I'm in protection mode. I'm hunkered down, and so there's no way to be happy when you're hunkered down and got the antenna up. But when I feel safe with my friends, now I'm like, oh, my life's so good, And then suddenly you're reaching out to the next person. It's all very obvious stuff, But again, when we're in our own minds, alone with it, it's a tough neighborhood.
I've always been lucky. I've always had girl friends, some good girl. I have my oldest friend since elementary school. Did you talk to any guys about having female friendships?
Yeah, I remember I was talking to one cowboy in Wyoming, and I said, did you have any female friends? He said, nope.
Can't be friends with a woman.
And but you know, it was interesting. I think I mentioned in the book. I can't remember when I got married. I realized, and I had a bunch of female friends as well, and I realized after I got married that I approached all my female friends from a place of kind of flirtation, and that potentially we would sleep together. You know what I mean? We were going through enough. There was always the dynamic was always sort of slight flirtation in it, and I really had to readjust that. But I did talk to a bunch of guys, and most did not because they didn't think it was appropriate with their wives somehow.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, do you not trust yourself, or like, do you think you're that hot a catch that these women are just going to throw yourselves? The Mike Pence kind of school, like, Mike, are you that hot that these women aren't going to control themselves around you? I think we often have a skewed perception of our place in the world, and that's yeah. Anyway, so I'd say about half of them said they did, maybe a little less, little less. Yeah.
How have the friendships rejuvenated since you've done this book? I mean, have you kept up? Have they reignited, or have you fallen back into kind of
it's
taking
been great.
them for granted?
It wasn't even taking them for granted. It was just neglecting.
Neglecting. Yes,
I always guide them, but there's a difference, because you can talk to my wife every day and I take her for granted, unless I get slapped upside the head sometime. But when you neglect something, it begins to atrophy in an active way, But yeah, I've kept up with all of them, and I've seen a couple of them several times since. I went out camping not that long ago with one of them, and it's been great. At the end of the book, there, spoiler, my son hears me laughing talking to one of my friends, and they, on the phone, and he goes, "Geez, Dad, it's so nice to hear you talking to your friends. I never heard that before," So it kind of came full circle with that. It's just, and the thing is, we're at an age. One of the most valuable things I got out of talking to everybody was like I was saying, I actively went to see them. So I was putting myself out on the line, sort of saying, "This is important to me. You're important to me." You know what I mean? I showed up at your door, and that notion of, we kind of named our friendship and how valuable it was. Like I would tell my friends, like, "You are really important to me. I needed to come see you." And in actively naming something, taking ownership of it in that way, it's a vulnerable making act, but not too much. I mean, you're not going to be, didn't risk being shamed by this. It really made us appreciate our friendships even more by saying, I'm so, my friends go, "I'm so glad you came down to see me. This is so great." I go, "Well, you're important to me, man. You're really important to me." And I've neglected that. And to just sort of own that, like these two cops I met in Ohio, these old guys are in their 70s, retired cops. And they said, and I met when they were 10. They've been best friends for 60 years. And they're like inseparable. They live next to each other. And they said, "Yeah, we recently started saying 'I love you' to each other." And because I tell my wife I love her, I tell my kids I love her. Why can't I tell my best bud I love her? And I just thought that was so kind of beautiful in this very simple way. And, they were very secure in who they were as men and their place in the world, and I kind of looked at them with this awe. I've never had a relationship that sort of intimate and close and supportive. I can't imagine how different my life would have been had I had somebody right there every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You sound like you have a lot more friends than I do.
No, I do. I have friends. I mean, I probably speak to 5 or 6 times a day, different friends.
Do you?
Yeah, real. I mean, like I said, I have 2 friends for almost 60 years since elementary school. I have 4 or 5 great friends from college. I have all my friends I made from city. So I have friends 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And what I love about it is it keeps all your memories alive. I mean, I'm not saying every time I'm talking to my friend, we're going back, but I went to University of Pennsylvania. I have my Penn friends, and it's just like we're still in college because we're still talking the way we did there. So it's and I'm not saying we spent all our time, remember when, but there's these solid foundations and roots, and it's kind of the benchmarks of your life. And it's just, I mean, this Friday night, I'm having dinner with my 2 friends from elementary school and their spouses. And it's very, I want to find the right word, filling. It's very filling. And I don't know what I would do without my friends. And today I've already texted with 2 friends and talked to 1 friend on the phone. Just common, normal, typical day stuff. It goes on all day. So I'm really lucky that way. So I was really curious to talk to you about this.
And you said a couple of things. One of the guys I met down in Austin, Texas, just looked at me. He again had a friend for 50 years, and I was chatting with the both of them. And he said, friendship isn't something, exotic. It's just normal.
Yeah.
And I thought that just sort of let all the air out of the balloon and just go, this is normal. This is the appropriate, what's normal. And it's a team sport. As my friend Eddie said to me at one point, because we're foundational relationships. I've known Eddie since I was 16 years old. He's one of the guys I went to see in Texas. And he said, this is a team sport, and we are and like you're talking about, these are foundational relationships with people. It's like when you say you're not always talking nostalgia. It's like I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan. I'm from New Jersey. So what are you going to do?
Back at you, right.
Right? So I've been listening to Born to Run for 50 years, and I played it yesterday, and I was walking down the street, it was in my headphones, and I was just singing, and and it wasn't a nostalgic feeling, but I have such a relationship with that song for so long that it brings me into the past, and yet it brings up into my future, and it's a template. It reflects back at me who I am and how I am, and that's what friends do as well. Like that song is a friend to me in a certain way.
Yeah.
And that's even better than that is actual live people like you're talking about, and that you do that is it's a valuable use of time. And I didn't appreciate that, Donny. I didn't appreciate that for how valuable use of time that was.
Before I let you go, I loved the doc you did last year on the Brat Pack. What's been the reaction to that? It was for me. Obviously, I grew up with all your movies, and you guys. How old are you? Can I ask you your age?
63.
63. I'm 67, so pretty close. What was the reaction to that movie? I found it so enjoyable. It moved me. I thought it was wonderful.
You're nice. People loved it. It was for me and the guys in the Brat Pack and ladies. We are like the avatars of youth for a certain dynamic, a certain generation. And so when they see us, they see me, they see whoever. People come up to me and they'll go, "Oh my God, Andrew McCarthy. Oh, pretty in pink," and they start talking, and pretty soon I realized they're not talking to me anymore. They're talking to their own youth.
Yes.
That's interesting. Their eyes have glazed over, and they're just because they're rekindling and reliving that moment when they're coming of age. And there's no more powerful moment, I think, in our lives than we're just blossoming, and our world's a blank slate to be written upon, and you're just blossoming out into the world. And it's a thrilling, wondrous time in life. And we represent that to that generation of people. And so it took me years to realize it was a real blessing, and probably the greatest professional blessing of my life, and not something to sort of have to run from, or because we didn't like the label at the beginning. So going back and seeing everybody, long-winded answer, was a real treat as well, because I had so much affection for everybody, and consequently I had a lot more affection for my own youth than I did before. I would see Rob or Demi or Ali, people I hadn't seen in 30 years, and I'd just look at them and I don't know anything about them, but on a deep level, in a certain way, I know them intimately in a way no one else can know, and they can know me because we went through this sort of thing together. So it was wonderful to go back and see everybody again. Again, it was sort of like, I guess when I got to be 60, I kind of you start to look back in this way and go, let's take some stock here. What matters? What's important? So I was very glad that I did it, because it told me that it was meaningful, because it was always something I kind of dismissed and tried to move on from. And I kind of turned around and gave it a big fat hug.
And why couldn't you get Judd?
He wasn't ready.
I love the end of the movie. It was a great. There was such a great little button at the end.
Yeah, no, it was fun. That when we found that, it was like, oh, that works. I would love to have talked to Judd. He wanted to at the beginning, and then he just kind of changed his mind and said, he wasn't ready for the hug, I guess.
Right. Hey, the book is Who Needs Friends? An Unscientific Examination of Male Friendship Across America. If you're a male, it's a must-read. If it's a female, that's a must-read also. It's fantastic. Congratulations on all your success, my friend.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Everybody, thanks for watching. If you like it, hit that subscribe button. And we love having you here watching On Brand. And just don't miss any future episodes. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.